It was a morning in May 2025 when Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican representative from Georgia, chose to verbally target IBRAHIM Traoré during a live session on Twitter Spaces, where over 45,000 listeners were present. She spoke bluntly. "This African kid needs to be quiet and stop preaching to America. Who does he think he is?" In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim was in the middle of a cabinet meeting when his communications advisor, Yakuba Sawadogo, hurried in holding his phone. "Mr. President, U.S. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is making extremely serious remarks about you live on television." Ibrahim stopped mid-sentence and turned to Yakuba. At 35, the young leader of Burkina Faso was no stranger to criticism. But something in his aide's tone caught his attention. "What exactly did she say?" he inquired as the ministers nearby leaned forward to hear. "She called you an African boy and said you should shut up, and that you have no right to comment on America, Mr. President." The room went silent. Ibrahim was familiar with Marjorie Taylor Greene's reputation, one of the most provocative figures in U.S. politics, infamous for her extreme remarks and conspiracy theories. Yet, to publicly insult a foreign head of state on live television was unprecedented, even for her. "How many people are listening?" Ibrahim asked calmly. "Over 45,000, sir, and the number is rising quickly," Yakuba replied. Ibrahim stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the busy streets of Ouagadougou. People were going about their day, working, learning, helping shape the country's future. They depended on him to represent them. "Yakuba, can you get me connected to this broadcast?" Ibrahim asked, turning to his aide. The entire room fell quiet again. It was a bold move, directly engaging in a live confrontation with one of the most divisive American politicians. "Mr. President," said Dr. Alonso Ouedraogo, the foreign minister, "perhaps a more diplomatic approach would be better." Ibrahim raised his hand. "Doctor, with all respect, she called me a kid and told me to shut up. That's not diplomacy, that's plain disrespect." Yakuba was already busy typing. "I have it, sir. I can send a request to join the space now. Go ahead," Ibrahim replied. Back in Washington, Marjorie Taylor Greene continued her rant to the growing audience. "These African leaders think they can teach us democracy. America doesn't need lectures from third world dictators." The comment section lit up. Some agreed. Others sharply condemned her remarks. Suddenly, a notification appeared. "Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, has requested to join the conversation." Marjorie laughed out loud. "Look, who wants to speak, the African boy himself." She accepted the request immediately, confident she could embarrass the young president in front of the crowd. "Welcome to the show, President," she said with mocking emphasis. "Ready to hear some real talk about your nation?" Across the ocean, Ibrahim took a deep breath. At 35, he had confronted terrorists, survived economic challenges, and led during political storms. A loud U.S. Congresswoman was just another challenge. "Thank you for letting me speak, Congresswoman Greene," Ibrahim said, his calm, steady voice reaching the now over 50,000 listeners. "I'm here to clarify a few misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" Marjorie chuckled. "The only misunderstanding is your belief that you have any moral standing to talk about democracy." Ibrahim stayed, composed, a skill refined during his military service. "Congresswoman Greene, before we continue, may I ask you a basic question? Do you know where Burkina Faso is?" There was an awkward pause. "Of course I do. It's in Africa." "Good," Ibrahim replied. And can you tell me what our capital city is? Another hesitation. That doesn't matter. What matters is you have no right to criticize America, asterisk. Ibrahim smiled gently, even though he knew no one watching could see his expression. Our capital is Ouagadougou, Congresswoman, he said. And since we're discussing the basics, could you perhaps tell me Burkina Faso's GDP per capita? I don't need to know those kinds of technical statistics, Marjorie replied, her annoyance clearly audible in her voice. That's fascinating, Ibrahim continued smoothly, because you're openly criticizing a nation you've just admitted you know nothing about. He paused, letting the silence build. It reminds me of something, he said, dramatically pausing. Weren't you the one who claimed California wildfires were caused by Jewish space lasers? The reaction was instant, a wave of stunned silence. Then an outburst of comments, some laughing, others shocked by the pointed reference to Marjorie's past conspiracy theories. That's a misrepresentation, Shiestem, MERED. Ibrahim didn't stop. Didn't you also claim that COVID-19 vaccines had microchips for surveillance? He pressed. And that the 911 attacks were orchestrated from within? Marjorie was visibly unraveling. You don't have the right to, Congresswoman. Ibrahim interrupted firmly, his voice rising with calm authority. You called me an African boy and told me to shut up. Now, I'm going to show you why that was a serious mistake. The live audience had swelled to over 70,000, and on social media, the hashtag Greene story was spreading like wildfire. Let's talk about facts, Congresswoman Greene, Ibrahim said, his tone shifting into the calm and commanding cadence he used during university lectures. You represent the state of Georgia, correct? A state that, for centuries, was built on African slave labor. That was a long time ago, Marjorie snapped back. Exactly, Ibrahim responded. Just like many of Africa's modern struggles are direct consequences of European and American colonization. But let's put history aside and focus on the current moment. He paused, took a sip of water, then continued. Under my administration, Burkina Faso has cut extreme poverty by 31% in the past 3 years. How much has Georgia reduced poverty in the same time frame? Marjorie said nothing. We've built 847 new schools. How many schools have been added in Georgia? Still no response. Our national literacy rate rose from 67% to 84%. Meanwhile, there are still counties in Georgia where basic literacy falls below 80%. Ibrahim was just warming up. Congresswoman, you personally voted against an infrastructure bill that would have delivered $2 billion to your own state. And yet, with far fewer resources, we've constructed 750 miles of rural roads just in the past year. Reactions exploded in the chat, fire emojis, clapping hands, and stunned faces filled the feed. American journalists began logging in to the space, with some already calling it a diplomatic masterclass unfolding in real time. You also voted against expanding Medicaid in Georgia, effectively blocking healthcare for 450,000 of your citizens. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, we've lowered infant mortality rates by 28%, despite operating on a fraction of your budget. Marjorie tried to jump in, but Ibrahim continued without pause. And since we're talking about democracy, he added, haven't you attempted to dispute certified election outcomes? Haven't you actively participated in efforts to overturn the will of the American voters? It was a direct hit. The same congresswoman who had set out to ridicule an African leader was now being dismantled with hard facts, in front of an audience that had grown to over 80,000 live listeners. Congresswoman Greene, Ibrahim went on, let's move to something you may find more familiar. Basic economic figures. Though still polite, his tone had the calm precision of a scalpel. Burkina Faso's population stands at 22 million. Our entire national budget is $4.2 billion. With that, we've created 340,000 direct jobs in the past 2 years. Marjorie attempted to interject, but your country is still poor. Yes, Ibrahim acknowledged, we are a developing nation. But here's the crucial difference. We are advancing steadily, using our own limited resources, whereas Georgia, with far greater wealth and established systems, still has unemployment rates close to ours. He didn't stop. Youth unemployment in Georgia sits at 18.3%. In Burkina Faso, it's 17.8%. He paused again, letting the silence speak. Volumes. That means, Congresswoman. The so-called world dictator you referred to, Ibrahim said with a composed tone, is currently generating more opportunities for his youth than your US state, Congresswoman. Marjorie's pause was telling. The silence felt heavy, sensing the perfect moment. Ibrahim leaned in with his final, cutting remark. And since you're quite fond of conspiracy theories, let me offer one rooted in actual facts. Maybe the real issue isn't an African youth offering guidance to America, but an American lawmaker, unfamiliar with her own district, making remarks about nations she's never stepped foot in. The reaction online was instant and explosive. Hashtags like Gene Hart destroys Greene and hashtag Burkina Faso truth surged into global trends. Reporters from CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera were already contacting his team for exclusive sit-downs. Congresswoman Ibrahim continued calmly, beginning to conclude his statement. You told me to remain silent. But my background, both military and academic, has taught me something else. When someone attacks without substance, we respond not with emotion, but with truth. He paused deliberately, then said, now, I'd like to offer a public invitation. Come to Burkina Faso. Witness firsthand what this so-called African boy has built. You may discover a few things about what genuine leadership looks like. The live audience had now exceeded 95,000 listeners. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who had started the broadcast attempting to ridicule Ibrahim Traoré, was now completely quiet, publicly embarrassed before the entire globe, without a word. She disconnected from the broadcast, but the damage was already irreversible. Within minutes, short video clips of the verbal exchange were circulating widely on social media platforms. On Twitter, hashtag #DumbGreen and hashtag #GreenHumiliated became top trending tags in under 20 minutes. Back in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim ended the call and looked up to find his ministers in stunned silence until Dr. Aragu slowly began to clap. One by one, the entire cabinet rose and joined in applause. Mr. President, Yakuba said, checking his phone, the stats are unbelievable. We peaked at 98,000 live listeners, and clips from the stream have already racked up more than 2 million views. Meanwhile, chaos had erupted in Greene's Washington office. Her press secretary, Jennifer Walsh, scrambled for damage control. Congresswoman, we need a response plan. The media won't stop calling. Marjorie was pacing, red with anger. That damn African made me look like a fool. How the hell did he know so much about Georgia? He was clearly prepared, Jennifer replied carefully. And, technically, everything he said about your record was accurate. I don't care. Just figure out how we can strike back. Greene barked, but the fallout had already begun. On CNN, Anderson Cooper opened his segment with the headline, U.S. Congresswoman outclassed by African president in live debates. Even on Fox News, Tucker Carlson, usually sympathetic to Greene's views, commented, "Politics aside, we have to admit that guy came fully armed with facts." In Congress, fellow Republicans began to pull away from Greene. "She crossed the line," a representative from Texas told the press. "Publicly insulting a foreign head of state like that, completely out of bounds." Even former President Trump, ever attuned to public sentiment, weighed in on X, formerly Twitter. "I respect leaders who come prepared, no matter the country. America must always uphold diplomatic respect." In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim's phone was overwhelmed with calls from across the continent. The president of Senegal told him, "You defended the honor of all of Africa today." Nigeria's president added, "That was a defining moment, brother." Over the next 24 hours, the global response was staggering. Ibrahim Traoré woke to find himself a worldwide symbol of grace under fire. His foreign affairs advisor, Aminata Kone, entered his office carrying a thick folder. "Mr. President," she said with a smile, "we've received interview requests from CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, France 24, Deutsche Welle, and 47 more international agencies." As Ibrahim sipped his morning coffee, he flipped through the morning's headlines from around the world. The Guardian read, "Young African leader teaches U.S. politician a lesson in readiness." Le Monde stated, "When Africa responds with dignity and facts," Der Spiegel declared, "the moment that shifted global perception of African leadership." University students across the globe began organizing panel discussions and debates about the viral incident. At Harvard Law School, Professor Michael Thompson, who teaches international relations, told his class, "This serves as a textbook example of how solid preparation outshines hollow rhetoric." In Georgia, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's home state, the public reaction was divided. While her most loyal supporters tried to justify her actions, a large portion of Georgians felt embarrassed. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution published a strongly worded editorial. "Our representative brought shame to us on an international level." Business leaders in the state also began voicing their worries. "This damages our global reputation," said the CEO of a major Atlanta-based firm. "We don't want to be linked to this kind of conduct." Meanwhile, throughout Africa, the confrontation sparked a surge of continental pride. In South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa publicly stated, "Ibrahim Traoré has proven that Africa possesses leaders who are both prepared and eloquent." In Kenya, President William Ruto added, "He upheld our shared dignity with grace." In China, the moment was interpreted as a sign of America's waning diplomatic strength. Chinese media outlets remarked that when the world's second largest economy is intellectually outmaneuvered by a developing nation, it speaks volumes. Russia, too, capitalized on the event. President Vladimir Putin commented, "This marks the emergence of a new generation of global leaders." International investors took notice. Burkina Faso began attracting fresh interest. 3 European investment firms publicly expressed intent to fund infrastructure projects in the country. President Traoré's handling of the situation demonstrates both competence and stability, said one analyst based in London. Within a week of the broadcast, the pressure on Marjorie Taylor Greene had reached a critical level in the U.S. Congress, Democratic lawmakers began drafting a motion to formally censure her, and even some Republicans voiced concern. "She violated basic diplomatic norms," said the Democratic Majority Leader. "Attacking an allied nation's head of state like that is beyond unacceptable." House Speaker Mike Johnson found himself in a politically delicate situation. Though a Republican, he acknowledged the gravity of the moment. "I intend to speak privately with Congresswoman Greene about the importance of diplomatic decorum," he announced at a press briefing. On the other side of the Atlantic, IBRAHIM Traoré seized the moment skillfully. He announced a tour of top U.S. universities, including Georgetown, Columbia, and Yale. "We aim to build bridges, not walls," he told CNN in a follow-up interview. What happened with Congresswoman Greene was regrettable, but it underscores the need for respectful global dialogue. Tickets to his talks sold out in a matter of hours. American students were eager to hear from the young president who had dismantled a U.S. congresswoman using nothing but facts. At his first lecture at Georgetown, more than 3,000 people filled the venue. "Africa does not require rescuers," IBRAHIM told the packed audience. "We seek collaborators who treat us as equals." The applause lasted a full 5 minutes. In Burkina Faso, the aftermath brought unforeseen benefits. 3 US-based corporations announced new investments in the country, amounting to $800 million in total. "The president's display of leadership has given us the confidence to invest," said the CEO of a major multinational firm. Tourism also experienced a sudden boom. Burkina Faso saw a 340% surge in global searches related to travel. "The world wants to see the country led by the man who embarrassed an American congresswoman," the tourism minister joked. Still, IBRAHIM remained grounded. "We cannot let a viral sensation distract from our mission," he told his cabinet ministers. "We have a nation to build." International media kept following his journey closely. When he inaugurated a rural school, the BBC covered it. When he visited a newly built hospital, Al Jazeera filmed the event. The same African boy, Marjorie Taylor, Greene had tried to ridicule, was now one of the most admired voices in global leadership. 2 weeks after the confrontation, IBRAHIM Traoré decided it was time to make an official statement to the world. He planned a national address to be broadcast internationally. In the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, he prepared for a speech that would further define his statesmanship. "Aminata," he said to his advisor, "I want this message to be different. This isn't about what happened with Congresswoman Greene. This is about who we are as a people." The speech was planned for prime time and aired on over 80 international news networks. When IBRAHIM appeared on screen, wearing an elegant, traditional Burkinab outfit, his presence immediately captivated the audience. Citizens of Burkina Faso, friends of Africa, and members of the global community, he began, his tone calm but firm. "In recent weeks, our nation has drawn international attention in a most unexpected manner." He gave a faint smile. "An American congresswoman attempted to silence us, but the outcome was quite the opposite. The world is now listening." In the packed hall, diplomats from 45 nations listened with full attention. "We do not answer insults with rage. We do not stoop to disrespect. We answer with truth, with knowledge, and with dignity. That is the essence of who we are, a people who prefer to raise the level of dialogue rather than lower it." IBRAHIM gestured toward charts displayed behind him. "Since that moment, we have received 12 new international investment offers. 34 universities have invited us to create academic collaborations. 18 countries have requested formal cooperation agreements." The statistics were powerful, but IBRAHIM was aiming for something deeper. "Still, our greatest achievement isn't in these numbers," he said. "Our true victory lies in demonstrating that modern Africa is intelligent, articulate, and ready to lead." He paused for effect. Yes, we are young. Yes, we come from a continent still developing. But that does not diminish us. It strengthens our resolve. More than 15 million viewers were watching around the globe. Congresswoman Greene tried to insult me by calling me an African boy, he said. Well, I accept that label with honor. I am young, I am African, and I am working every day to build a better tomorrow for my people. The speech lasted 30 minutes and ended with Ibrahim addressing the camera directly to the United States. We are allies, not subordinates. To Europe, we are equals, not recipients of pity. To the world, Africa is prepared to take its seat at the global table. 6 months after the confrontation that had captivated the globe, the landscape had transformed. Ibrahim Traoré was now in New York, no longer perceived as a leader of a distant nation, but as one of the most respected voices in global diplomacy. He had been formally invited to address the United Nations General Assembly on youth leadership. In the modern era, back in Burkina Faso, the concrete results were astonishing. The nation had attracted $3.2 billion in direct foreign investment. 5 new universities were being developed through global partnerships. The country's GDP had risen 18% in the first 6 months of the year, a national record. Who could have predicted that a public clash with a US congresswoman would shift our path so dramatically, said Dr. Wedrogo at a ministerial session. Still, Ibrahim remained grounded. That confrontation, he reminded his team, was just a spark. The real mission has always been the progress of our people. Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene was facing the fallout. She had lost 2 significant committee assignments in Congress and was now up against a serious opponent in her own Republican primary. The Traoré incident shattered her credibility, said one political commentator from Atlanta. A recent poll showed that 67% of voters in Georgia disapproved of her handling of the situation. Across Africa, Ibrahim had become a symbol of a new, bold diplomatic era. Young leaders in other African nations began to embrace more confident voices in global affairs. He showed us that respect doesn't require submission, declared the president of Ghana. Academically, the ripple effects were also profound. 3 top US universities launched new international relations courses centered on the Traoré phenomenon. Harvard Business School even developed a detailed case study titled "Turning Conflict into Global Opportunity." One calm evening, in what Ibrahim strolled through the presidential gardens with his close confidant. "Ajara, you changed the way the world looks at Africa," she said softly. "No," Ibrahim replied, gazing at the stars. "I only revealed the truth of who we've always been. The difference now is that they're finally paying attention." What began as an attempt by Marjorie Taylor Greene to dismiss and silence a younger African leader ended with that very man reshaping Africa's role in global affairs. Ibrahim Traoré had demonstrated a powerful lesson in the digital era. Integrity, intellect, and readiness carry more weight than intimidation, and in just a few minutes, he flipped the global narrative.